In the shadowed heart of the frost-kissed citadel, where the moon's pale gaze pierced the vaulted stone like a silver dagger, a single tear traced the curve of Seren Valeris's cheek, freezing mid-fall into a crystal of unspoken fate. The grand hall of the Alpha Council loomed like a cavern hewn from ancient ice, its walls etched with runes that glowed faintly under the perpetual twilight filtering through narrow slits high above. Torches sputtered in iron sconces, their flames dancing erratically against the chill that seeped from the snow-laden mountains beyond, carrying the distant howl of winds that mourned the pack's fractured loyalties. The air was thick with the scent of pine resin and smoldering embers, mingled with the metallic tang of fear sweat from the gathered alphas. Their eyes, sharp as wolf fangs, fixed on the lone figure at the hall's center, Seren Valeris, the Omega whose very presence seemed to mock the rigid hierarchies of their world. She stood bound in chains of blackened silver, the links cold as the betrayal that had forged them. Her simple woolen gown, frayed at the hems from nights spent fleeing through blizzard-swept passes, clung to her slender frame, dusted with the white powder of endless winter. At her throat hung a modest pendant, a shard of moonstone veined with silver, inherited from a mother long lost to the wilds. It had always been her secret talisman, warm against her skin when doubt clawed at her heart, but now it felt like a weight, pulsing faintly as if echoing the rhythm of her ragged breaths. Seren's dark hair, unbound and tangled, framed a face pale as fresh snow, her emerald eyes wide with a terror she refused to voice. She was no warrior, no schemer, she was the quiet healer of her border pack, the one who mended wounds with herbs and whispers under the stars. Yet here she was, accused of treason, the unforgivable sin of whispering secrets to rival clans, of unraveling the fragile peace that held their frozen realm together. The council encircled her on a raised dais of polished obsidian, 13 alphas in total, their fur-lined cloaks heavy with the insignia of their lineages. Snarling wolves embroidered in thread of gold, swords crossed over shields of ice blue. At their head sat Lord Thorn, the High Alpha, his grizzled beard streaked with silver, his gaze as unyielding as the glaciers that guarded the citadel's gates. Flanking him were the others, stern faces etched by years of war and intrigue, their sense a dominant storm of musk and authority that pressed against Seren like an invisible tide. Whispers had rippled through the packs for moons, visions haunting the elders, omens of a betrayer within. And when strange lights had flickered in the northern skies above her village, fingers had pointed to the Omega, who wandered alone under the full moon, gathering forbidden blooms that glowed with ethereal light. "Treason," Lord Thorn intoned, his voice a low rumble that echoed off the vaulted ceiling, stirring the torch flames to wilder fury. "You stand accused of consorting with the shadow packs of the eastern wastes, of feeding them intelligence that weakens our borders. The evidence is irrefutable. Scouts bear witness to your midnight flights, your hands stained with the blood of our fallen." He gestured to a scarred beta at his side, who stepped forward with a bloodied cloth, its crimson folds unfurling to reveal smears that matched the earth from Seren's herb garden. Lies, all of it, woven from envy and fear. Her flights were but dreams, fevered walks born of grief after her pack's alpha had rejected her bond, casting her aside like a flawed vessel. But truth held no sway here. Power did. Serene's heart thundered in her chest, a frantic drum against the icy silence. The chains bit into her wrists, drawing thin lines of blood that trickled warm down her chilled skin, staining the pendant at her throat. She lifted her chin, meeting Thorn's eyes with a defiance she barely felt. "I am no traitor," she whispered, her voice steady despite the tremor in her limbs. "The moon sees all. It knows the shadows that truly stalk our packs." Murmurs rippled through the assembly, alphas shifting uneasily, betas averting their gazes. The hall's chill deepened, as if the mountains themselves held their breath. Thorn's lip curled in disdain. "The moon's favor is for the strong, not the weak-willed Omega who dreams of grandeur. The verdict is death by exile, cast into the abyss beyond the frost wall, where the wilds claim what the council deems unfit. He raised his gavel, carved from the antler of an ancient stag, and brought it down with a crack that split the air like thunder. The alphas rose as one, their howls a chorus of judgment, raw and primal, vibrating through the stone floor and up Seren's spine. She staggered, the world blurring as despair clawed at her throat. Exile meant the frozen wastes, the endless night where blizzards devoured the unwary, and no pack's fire would welcome her. Her life, her quiet hopes of healing and belonging, reduced to ashes in this hall of ice and firelight. But as the guards advanced, chains rattling like the bones of forgotten ancestors, the earth trembled. A low groan emanated from the walls, dust sifting from the cracks as if the citadel wept. The torches flared, casting elongated shadows that writhed like living smoke. And then, from the domed ceiling, a blinding silver light cascaded down, pure, unyielding, like moonlight distilled into liquid fire. Gasps tore through the hall. Alphas dropped to their knees, shielding their eyes as the radiance intensified, filling the space with a warmth that banished the chill. In its heart, a figure materialized, ethereal and towering, her form woven from starlight and mist. The moon goddess, ancient and serene, her gown flowing like rivers of mercury, her eyes twin full moons that pierced the soul. She descended, silent as falling snow, her bare feet touching the stone without a sound. The alphas trembled, heads bowed low, their howls silenced into whimpers. Past Thorn she glided, ignoring his outstretched hand, past the council's dais, where even the high alpha shrank back. Her gaze, soft yet inexorable, fixed on Seren alone. With graceful reverence, the goddess knelt before the chained Omega, her luminous hand reaching out to cup Seren's face. The touch was fire and frost entwined, sending a jolt through Seren's veins that made the pendant at her throat blaze with inner light. "You are no criminal, child of the Pax," the goddess murmured, her voice a melody of wind through ancient pines, carrying the scent of night-blooming jasmine and fresh-fallen snow. "Your crime is the awakening of destiny itself, the Pathfinder's mark, bearer of the futures woven in silver thread. Rise, for the moon bows to its chosen, and the Pax shall heed or perish in their blindness." Seren's breath caught, tears thawing the frozen crystal on her cheek as the chains fell away, dissolving into mist. The hall held its breath, the air humming with unspoken reckonings, while outside the wind howled a prophecy yet to unfold. The silver light lingered in the hall like a fading echo of divine thunder, casting long shadows that twisted across the obsidian floor as the moon goddess withdrew, her form dissolving into motes of stardust that settled upon the alphas' bowed heads. Seren Valeris stood frozen, the warmth of the touch still blooming across her skin, a counterpoint to the relentless chill seeping back into the citadel's bones. Her wrists, moments ago bound by chains, now bore only faint red welts, like the scars of a dream half remembered. The moonstone pendant at her throat pulsed once more, its veined silver glowing faintly before dimming to a subdued shimmer, as if it had drunk deeply of the celestial fire and now slumbered, sated yet watchful. The alphas rose slowly, their faces a mosaic of awe and resentment, eyes darting between Seren and the empty space where the goddess had knelt. Lord Thorn's gavel lay forgotten on the dais, his knuckles white as he gripped the arm of his throne. The air hummed with the residue of her presence, jasmine and snow, a scent that clung to Seren's gown like an invisible cloak, marking her irrevocably. Whispers erupted into a cacophony of growls and murmurs, the council fracturing like thin ice under a wolf's paw. "The Pathfinder," one elder beta hissed, his voice laced with fear. "She bears the mark." The vision spoke of this, a Omega to guide or doom us all. But awe curdled swiftly into suspicion. the pack's ancient hierarchies recoiling from the upending truth. Thorn's gaze hardened, his authority challenged not by blade or claw, but by the moon's unyielding decree. "Destiny or delusion?" he snarled, rising to his full height, his fur-lined cloak billowing like storm clouds. "The goddess may spare you the noose, Omega, but the packs do not bow to riddles. Your visions have sown discord, shadows in the north, whispers of invasion from the eastern wastes. You will be exiled, cast beyond the frost wall, until the moon proves its claim, or the wilds devour your so-called gift." His words were a verdict wrapped in piety, a compromise to appease the divine while preserving the council's iron grip. No execution, but banishment, a death sentence cloaked in mercy, for the frozen abyss beyond the wall was a graveyard of bones and blizzards where even the strongest alphas wandered lost. Seren's heart clenched, the brief spark of vindication snuffed out by the weight of isolation. She had always been the outsider, the Omega whose gentle hands healed fractures in flesh and spirit, yet whose quiet nights under the moon drew envious glares. Now, marked by the goddess, she was both savior and pariah, her destiny a chain heavier than silver. The pendant warmed against her chest, a solitary comfort amid the rising tide of rejection. Guards, betas with faces carved from granite, flanked her, their grips firm but laced with hesitation, as if touching her might invoke the lunar wrath anew. They led her from the hall, through corridors where torchlight flickered like dying stars, the stone walls weeping rivulets of meltwater from the heat of the divine light. Outside, the citadel's gates groaned open under a sky bruised with perpetual dusk, the wind a keening wail that carried the howls of distant packs, mourning or mocking, she could not tell. Snow swirled in furious eddies, blanketing the world in white silence, each flake a tiny blade against her exposed skin. The frost wall loomed ahead, a colossal barrier of ice and iron forged by ancient alphas to hold back the wilds, its surface etched with runes that glowed faintly blue against the encroaching night. Seren's breath came in shallow gasps, frosting the air before her as the guards marched her to the wall's shadowed base. No ceremony, no final words from her pack. The council's decree was law, and the moon's intervention had only deepened the chasm. At the gate, a jagged maw in the ice, they unbound her fully, shoving a threadbare cloak into her arms, its wool coarse and smelling of mildew. "Go," one guard muttered, his eyes averted, a flicker of pity in his scent. "And pray the goddess's favor doesn't abandon you in the dark." The gate creaked shut behind her with a finality that echoed like a tomb ceiling, the sound swallowed by the wind's relentless roar. Alone now, Serene stumbled forward into the exile's embrace, the snow rising to her ankles, then knees, as the terrain sloped into the abyss. The pendant swung against her breast, its weight a reminder of the mark she bore, the Pathfinder's gift, visions that had haunted her dreams. Silver threads weaving through bloodied battles, a shadowed figure cloaked in guilt reaching for her hand. The cold burrowed deep, numbing her fingers and toes, but it was the ache in her soul that truly froze her. Rejected not just by her alpha's cold dismissal moons ago, but by the very packs she had served, her healing touch now twisted into treason. What strength was there in mercy if it led only to this? She pressed on, the wind whipping her hair like dark banners of defiance. Weavos faint on the horizon, wild wolves or spectral echoes, calling her to an uncertain fate. Hours blurred into a haze of white and gray, the mountain's jagged peaks silhouetted against a moon that watched impassively, its light filtering through storm clouds like a veiled promise. In a narrow ravine, sheltered by overhanging cliffs veined with frost, Seren collapsed against a boulder, her body racked with shivers. The cloak offered scant warmth, and hunger gnawed at her belly, but it was the loneliness that clawed deepest, a void where belonging should have been. She clutched the pendant, its surface smooth under her thumb, tracing the silver veins that mirrored the lunar light. In its glow, a vision flickered unbidden, a man, tall and battle-worn, his eyes stormy with unspoken burdens, extending a hand scarred by old flames. An alpha, not of conquest, but of quiet torment. Her breath hitched. Was this the thread pulling her forward, or merely the delirium of the cold? As night deepened, the wind carried a new sound, a low, pained growl, not of the wilds, but closer, human in its anguish. Seren tensed, peering into the swirling snow, her heart pounding a rhythm of fear and fragile hope. The moon hung low, bathing the ravine in silver, and in that light a shadow emerged from the blizzard's heart, feral, wounded, and inexorably drawn. And now, I invite you to leave a trace of your presence in the comments. Tell us where in the world you're watching from, and the exact hour you hear this story. We wish to know how far these northern confessions travel, and at what moments of the night they find you. The blizzard's fury clawed at the ravine's jagged walls, hurling snow like shards of shattered bone against Seren's huddled form. She pressed deeper into the overhang's shadow, the rough granite biting into her back through the threadbare cloak, its chill seeping into her marrow like an old betrayal. The moonstone pendant lay heavy against her chest, its faint pulse a mocking heartbeat in the void of her exile. Hours had bled into eternity since the frost wall sealed her fate, each step a defiance against the numbness creeping through her limbs. Hunger twisted her gut, a dull ache overshadowed by the deeper wound, the pack's rejection, the goddess's touch that promised destiny, yet delivered only isolation. What was this pathfinder's mark if it led her to perish alone? A whisper lost in the wind's indifferent howl. The growl came again, closer now, ragged and laced with pain that resonated in her bones. Not the wild pack's chorus, but something fractured, human in its desperation. Seren's breath caught, fogging the air before her as she scanned the swirling white veil. Fear coiled tight in her belly, instinctive as the Omega's flight response, urging her to flee deeper into the ravine where the cliffs might swallow her whole. Yet curiosity stirred, unbidden, a thread of silver light in her mind, tugging like the pendant's warmth. The visions had shown her this, a shadowed figure, burdens etched in scars, reaching through the storm. Was it madness, or the moon's subtle guidance? From the blizzard's maw emerged a silhouette, staggering against the gale. Tall, broad-shouldered, cloaked in a mantle torn and bloodied, the figure collapsed to one knee mere paces away, a guttural groan escaping lips cracked by frost. Moonlight pierced the clouds just enough to silver his features, sharp jaw shadowed by stubble, hair matted dark with snow and sweat, eyes, storm-gray and haunted, flaring with feral intensity as they locked onto hers. An alpha, unmistakably, his scent cutting through the storm's metallic bite like aged oak and smoldering embers, laced with the copper tang of fresh wounds. Eric Rowan, though she did not yet know his name. Counselor to the council, whispered betrayer in the halls of power, now hunted by the very packs he had served. He rose unsteadily, one hand clamped over a gash across his ribs, crimson seeping through fingers gloved in cracked leather. The wound wept blood that steamed faintly on the snow, staining it a deep, accusing red. His breath rasped, visible in plumes that mingled with the wind's wail, and for a moment the world narrowed to the space between them, their shared silence a fragile bridge over the abyss. Seren's pulse thundered, an instinctive pull toward him warring with the terror of his dominance. Alphas were storms made flesh, their presence a command that bent wills. This one carried guilt like a shroud, his gaze not conquering but searching, as if she were a riddle he dared not solve. Who? The word escaped her lips, barely audible over the gale, but he heard it, his head snapping up with a predator's precision. He took a step forward, then halted, swaying as pain lanced through him. Up close, the scars were visible, an old burn twisting across his collarbone, peeking from the rent cloak. and fresher claw marks raking his forearm, marks of betrayal, not battle. His eyes narrowed, scenting her omega essence amid the fear, and something flickered there, recognition, or perhaps the moon's echo in his tormented soul. "Stay back," he growled, voice gravel rough, laced with the authority of one born to counsel kings, yet now reduced to prey. But there was no threat in it, only exhaustion, a plea masked as warning. He glanced over his shoulder into the blizzard, where distant howls pierced the night, pursuers, relentless shadows from the council's decree. Eric had spoken against Thorn's verdict, his voice a lone thunder in the hall, questioning the exile of the moon-marked. For that, he was branded traitor, his own pack turning claws on him in the chaos following the goddess's descent. Guilt had long been his companion, the weight of counsel given too late, lives lost to political games he could not fully stem. But this flight stripped him bare, exposing the melancholy beneath his ethical armor. Seren did not retreat. Instead, she rose slowly, cloak shedding snow like forgotten regrets, her emerald eyes meeting his without flinching. The pendant warmed, a subtle thrum syncing with her quickening heart, as if the moonstone sensed the convergence of fates. Fear still gripped her. Alphas had rejected her before, their bonds a cruel illusion. But curiosity bloomed, instinctive and undeniable. He was no mindless beast. His pain mirrored her own, a shared fracture in the pack's unyielding hierarchy. "You're hurt," she said softly, stepping closer despite the wind's protest, her voice carrying the healer's quiet resolve. The air between them thickened, charged with the unspoken. An omega and an alpha, exiles drawn by invisible threads, their scents entwining like smoke from a hidden fire. Eric's hand dropped from his side, revealing the wound's depth, jagged and inflamed, blood flowing freer now in the cold. He studied her, the Pathfinder's mark evident in the faint silver glow about her throat, and a tremor passed through him, not of weakness, but revelation. "You, the one they cast out." His words were a breath, denial warring with the pull he felt, deep in his core, a connection primal yet resisted, rationalized as survival's trick. He could not afford vulnerability, not with the Council's hunters closing in, their betrayal a fresh scar on his duty-bound heart. Yet her presence soothed the storm within, her scent of wild herbs and lunar frost a balm against the guilt that had hollowed him for moons. The howls grew nearer, echoing off the cliffs like judgments from the stars. Seren's hand hovered, instinct urging her to touch, to heal as she always had, but fear held her back. This Alpha's world was one of councils and wars, not her quiet herbs. He straightened, grimacing, and met her gaze fully, the moon casting their shadows long and intertwined on the snow. "Run, Omega. This storm claims more than the lost." But even as he spoke, his body leaned toward her, the denial cracking like thin ice under the weight of destiny's gaze. In that suspended moment, as the wind howled its ancient sorrow and blood dripped warm onto the frozen earth, Seren felt the first stirrings of a bond unasked for, a curiosity that pierced the fear, hinting at redemption's fragile flame. Yet the night pressed on, enemies unseen in the white shroud, and the choice loomed. Flee alone, or tether her fate to this wounded king of shadows. The pendant burned hotter, a silent witness to the encounter that could shatter them both. The ravine's shadows deepened as the blizzard's roar softened to a mournful whisper, the wind carving hollows in the snow like the regrets etched into Eric's soul. Serene knelt beside him, her hands trembling not from the cold, but from the forbidden pull of his nearness, the Alpha's scent wrapping around her like smoke from a dying hearth, warm, insistent, laced with the sharp bite of blood and unspoken burdens. He had slumped against the boulder, his cloak a ragged banner splayed across the frost, the gash in his side a crimson accusation against the white expanse, The moonstone pendant at her throat thrummed in rhythm with his labored breaths, its silver veins flickering like captured starlight, urging her forward despite the instinctual recoil. Touch an alpha and risk the storm within. Heal him and invite the chaos of fates entwined. "You shouldn't," Eric rasped, his storm-gray eyes locking onto hers with the intensity that stripped away the barriers of rank and exile. Guilt shadowed his features, a melancholy veil over the ethical core that had driven him to defy the council, only to be branded traitor for it. He had counseled peace amid the pack's brewing wars, whispering against Thorn's iron-fisted decrees, but his words had sown doubt, and now the hunters bayed for his blood. The old burn scar across his collarbone gleamed faintly in the moonlight, a relic of a fire long quenched, yet it mirrored the inner blaze of duty that consumed him. "Leave me to the wilds, your mark. It draws enough peril without my ruin." Serene's fingers hovered over the wound, the air between them charged with the scent of pine and iron, her healer's instincts warring with the Omega's fear of rejection's echo. The Pax had cast her out, labeling her visions treason, but here, in this frozen crevice, survival demanded choice. Mercy was her strength, not the blade or claw. What was destiny if not the courage to extend a hand into the dark? She pressed her palm to his side, ignoring the jolt that raced up her arm, his skin fever-hot beneath the chill, muscles tensing under her touch like a wolf poised to flee or fight. Blood welled warm against her skin, staining her fingers, but as she closed her eyes, willing the herb's memory into her veins, something deeper stirred. The pendant ignited, its glow blooming from subtle pulse to radiant fire, silver light spilling across Eric's form like moonlight through fractured ice. Serene gasped, her vision fracturing, not the fevered dreams of before, but a clarity sharp as a winter dawn. Threads of silver unfurled in her mind's eye, weaving through the Pack's fractured loyalties, Thorn's throne cracking under waves of betrayal from the eastern shadows, Packs clashing in bloodied snow under a blood moon, and at the center, a figure, Eric, standing at a crossroads, his hand outstretched toward a veiled Omega whose light could bind or break the realm. Her gift, the Pathfinder's mark, surged unbidden, not mere healing, but revelation, futures branching like ravine streams, each choice a ripple in the lunar weave. Eric's breath hitched, his body arching as the light seeped into his wound, knitting flesh with ethereal threads that glowed and faded, leaving only smooth skin marred by a faint silver scar. Pain etched his face, then eased into wonder, his eyes widening as fragments of her vision bled into his own, a shared torrent of silver and shadow. He saw it, the Council's blindness, his own role in the exiles that had weakened the borders, and her, the quiet Omega whose destiny was no curse, but the key to mending the Pack's unraveling tapestry. Guilt, his constant companion, twisted sharper. He had failed to see the signs in his council, rationalizing politics over the moon's whispers, and now she, rejected and marked, held the truth he had sought in vain. "You?" His voice broke, a low rumble that vibrated through the stone, his hand rising to grasp her wrist, not in dominance, but in desperate anchor. The connection hummed between them, instinctive yet resisted, a bond born of necessity rather than desire, rationalized as the moon's cruel jest. Alphas did not yield to Omegas, kings of shadow did not kneel to the exiled. Yet her light pierced his melancholy armor, revealing the ethical heart beneath, duty not to thrones, but to the souls they guarded. The visions, they're real, the goddesses chosen, guiding us from the abyss. I've chased omens in council halls, bartered peace with traitors, but this, your sight, it's the thread that binds the Pax against the coming storm. Seren pulled back, the pendant's glow dimming to a soft ember, leaving her drained, the cold rushing in like a rebuked lover. The revelation weighed on her, heavier than exile's isolation. She had glimpsed not just futures, But the cost: blood on snow, choices that demanded sacrifice. Her emerald eyes met his, searching the haunted depths, and for the first time, fear mingled with a fragile empathy. He was no savior. This alpha counselor, broken by guilt's chains as surely as she by rejections. The wind carried the distant howls anew, closer, a reminder that refuge was fleeting, enemies converging on this fragile convergence. "What does it mean?" she whispered, her voice a thread in the night, textured with the scent of snowmelt and healing herbs. "If I'm the key, why does the moon lead me to pain? Strength isn't in sight, Eric. It's in choosing mercy when war calls for claws." He rose slowly, testing the mended wound, his cloak falling open to reveal the silver scar that mirrored her pendant's veins, a mark of their shared unveiling. Melancholy etched deeper into his features, the ethical dilemma coiling like smoke: protect her and betray his packs further, abandon her, and doom the destiny he now believed. The moon hung low, bathing them in silver, its light reflecting in his eyes as he extended a hand, scarred and steady. "It means we're bound, whether we will it or not. The council hunts us both now, your exile, my treason. But together, perhaps we rewrite the weave before blood drowns it all." The howls crescendoed, shadows flickering at the ravine's mouth, forcing them to retreat deeper into the cliff's embrace, a hidden cleft where torchlight dared not reach. As they huddled in the dim hollow, backs to the unyielding stone, the air thickened with unspoken reckonings. Seren's heart pounded, the revelation a double-edged blade, power in her gift, peril in its price. Eric's presence loomed, a wall of warmth against the encroaching freeze, his guilt a mirror to her doubt. In the silence broken only by their breaths and the wind's lament, she wondered, what redemption lay in this bond, if love was trial, not triumph? The pendant rested cool now, a silent sentinel, as the night pressed its ethical weight upon them, demanding choices that could forge or fracture the frozen world. Subscribe if you believe mercy can crown even the fallen. The cleft's narrow embrace offered scant mercy, its walls a cage of jagged ice that wept rivulets of meltwater into the pooling shadows below. Seren huddled against the unyielding stone, the chill seeping through her cloak like fingers of forgotten doubt, while Eric's form loomed beside her, a bulwark of warmth and tension, his breaths steadying into the rhythm of guarded vigilance. The moonstone pendant rested cool against her skin now, its silver veins dormant after the revelation's blaze, yet it hummed faintly, a sentinel attuned to the silver threads of fate that bound them. The distant howls had faded into the wind's mournful sigh, lulling them into a fragile truce with the night, but sleep evaded her. Visions lingered in the corners of her mind, bloodied snowfields where packs tore at one another, thorns thrown splintering under the weight of his own deceptions, and Eric's scarred hand reaching not for power, but for the quiet mercy she embodied. What was this gift if it illuminated only the abyss? Dawn crept in reluctantly, a pallid gray light filtering through the ravine's mouth, painting the snow in hues of ash and steel. Eric stirred first, his storm-gray eyes scanning the horizon with the precision of one who had long navigated the treacherous currents of council intrigue. Guilt etched deeper lines into his face, a melancholy map of choices deferred, the ethical counsel he had offered Thorn, urging restraint against the eastern shadows, only to be cast as the very traitor he had warned of. "We can't linger," he murmured, his voice a low rumble that vibrated through the stone, carrying the scent of embers and resolve. "The hunters will circle back. The frost wall's breach draws them like wolves to a fresh kill." He rose, extending a hand to her, his touch lingering a fraction too long, instinctive, resisted, a bridge neither fully crossed nor burned. Seren accepted it, her fingers brushing the old burn scar on his palm, sending a shiver through her that had little to do with the cold. The connection pulsed, subtle as the pendant's thrum, stirring empathy amid the fear. He was no unchallenged king, this alpha counselor, but a man fractured by duty's blade, melancholy in his ethics, haunted by the pack's unraveling that his words had failed to mend. Together, they emerged from the cleft, the wind's bite sharper in the open, whipping snow into veils that obscured the path ahead. Days blurred into a relentless march through the wilds, frozen tundras where the earth cracked like brittle bone, sparse forests of skeletal pines bowing under ice burdens, and hidden streams that ran black with mineral veins, their waters tasting of iron and ancient sorrow. Eric led, his knowledge of the borderlands a map etched in memory, while Seren's visions flickered like torchlight, guiding them around ambushes, whispering of safe hollows where they could kindle fire from damp wood, its flames dancing shadows that mirrored their unspoken doubts. In those stolen moments by the hearth's glow, the bond deepened, not in tender whispers, but in the raw texture of shared survival. Eric spoke little of his past, yet his silences spoke volumes. The rejection of his own mate years ago, a political union dissolved in betrayal's fire, leaving him adrift in council's cold halls. "Strength is not in claw or crown," he said once, staring into the flames as embers popped like distant gunfire, "but in choosing the path that spares the innocent, even when it damns the chooser." His words echoed her own philosophy, born of rejection's sting, the alpha who had cast her aside, deeming her vision's weakness rather than wisdom. Yet acceptance eluded them. The pull was rationalized as necessity, the empathy a shield against the isolation that clawed at their heels. Love, if it stirred, was a trial forged in frost, not a reward to be claimed. The confrontation came unbidden on the fifth night, as they crested a ridge overlooking the shattered remnants of an ancient temple, its lunar arches cracked by time and war, altars stained with the blood of old rites. The moon hung full and merciless, bathing the ruins in silver that turned snow to shimmering glass. They had sought refuge there, drawn by Seren's vision of sanctuary, but the wind carried betrayal's scent before the shadows revealed it. Figures emerged from the tree line, a dozen betas and alphas, cloaks emblazoned with the council's snarling wolf, led by a rival whose presence twisted the air like a storm front, Kael Draven, Thorn's enforcer, an alpha of unyielding ambition whose eyes burned with the hunger of one who coveted thrones. His fur-lined mantle was pristine against the filth of the wilds, his scent a dominant assault of musk and forged steel, masking the traitor's rot beneath. Eric tensed, positioning himself before Seren, his body a shield of coiled muscle and quiet fury. "Draven," he growled, "the name a blade drawn in the night, you hunt shadows while the true darkness festers in your master's hall." The enforcer's lip curled, revealing fangs yellowed by battles won through cunning, not honor. He had been the whisperer in Thorn's ear, fabricating evidence against Seren to bury the Pathfinder's threat to his rising power, and now Eric's defiance made him a loose end. "Counselor Rowan, fallen to consort with the exile," Kael sneered, his voice echoing off the temple stones like cracking ice. "The council declared her guilty, treason against the Pax, and you, meddling in destinies above your station. Thorn sends his regards. Surrender, or join her in the abyss." The betas fanned out, claws extended, their howls a chorus that drowned the wind's lament. Serene's heart thundered, the pendant blazing hot against her throat as visions surged. Kael's betrayal unveiled, his secret pacts with the eastern wastes, fueling the invasion that would raise the Pax. But revelation was no weapon here. It was a mirror forcing choices into sharp relief. Eric lunged, a blur of shadow and claw, grappling Kael in a frenzy of fur and blood that sprayed across the snow like spilled wine. The rival alpha was a tempest of brute force, his strikes landing with bone-jarring impacts, reopening Eric's healed scars. Seren backed toward the temple's altar, her healer's hands useless against the fray, yet the silver threads in her mind wove urgently, futures branching. Forgive the pack's blindness and reveal the truth, binding them in uneasy alliance, or unleash war's fury, freeing herself from their chains at the cost of bloodied redemption. A beta lunged at her, claws raking the air, but Eric broke free, slamming into the attacker with a roar that shook the arches. Blood trickled from his lip, warm and metallic on the frozen ground, mingling with the temple's ancient stains. Kyle circled, eyes gleaming with triumph. The Omega's light blinds you, Rowan. Join me. Thorn's favor awaits those who crush omens like hers. Eric's gaze flicked to Serene, haunted by the ethical precipice. Love this bond, fragile and unclaimed, and fight for her freedom, dooming the packs to war's embrace, or forgive the council's folly, offering mercy that might heal the fractures, yet chain her to a destiny she never sought. Serene stepped forward, the pendant's glow illuminating her face like a lunar crown, her voice cutting through the snarls with quiet thunder. The moon sees your treason, Draven, not mine. The threads reveal it. Your whispers to the shadows, the pack's doom at your hand. The words hung. A spiritual indictment, forcing Kale to falter, his betas shifting uneasily. In that suspended breath, as claws hovered and blood steamed on snow, Seren faced the dilemma's core. What was redemption if not choosing compassion over conquest, even when freedom whispered of solitude? Eric met her eyes, the melancholy in his depths yielding to resolve, their bond a silent vow amid the gathering storm. The night held its breath, the temple's stones echoing the weight of choices yet unmade, where forgiveness could crown the fallen or ignite the war that would consume them all. The temple's lunar arches loomed like fractured ribs under the full moon's unblinking stare, their stones slick with meltwater and the fresh spill of blood that steamed faintly against the encroaching frost. Seren's breath came in shallow plumes, the air thick with the metallic tang of violence and the acrid bite of fierce sweat from the encircling betas. The pendant at her throat burned like a captured ember, its silver veins pulsing in sync with her racing heart, casting erratic glimmers across the snow-dusted altar where ancient runes flickered to life as if the moon itself stirred from slumber. Kale Draven's snarl twisted into a mask of fury, his eyes, cold as glacial crevasses, narrowing at her words, the revelation hanging between them like a blade poised to fall. Treason unveiled, not hers, but his. The silver threads of her vision coiling around his secret oaths to the eastern shadows, promises of thrones traded for invasion's flood. You dare speak of threads, Omega? Kale spat, his voice a venomous rumble that echoed off the arches, stirring the wind to a sharper howl. He circled Eric, claws extended, the fur of his mantle matted with the first beads of crimson from their clash. The betas shifted, their loyalty fracturing like thin ice under the weight of doubt, howls dying into uneasy growls as the pendant's light spilled wider, illuminating Kale's face in stark silver, guilt's shadow lurking beneath ambition's snarl. Eric stood firm before her, his body a scarred barrier, the old burn across his collarbone gleaming like a brand of past failures. Melancholy etched his features, deepened by the ethical chasm yawning before them. Fight for her truth, and ignite the war that would raise the packs, yield to forgiveness, and chain her light to the very council that had rejected it. The night fractured then, as distant thunder rolled, not from storm clouds, but from the earth itself. Hoofbeats and howls crescendoed from the ridge, a torrent of shadows bursting from the tree line. Thorn's vanguard, alphas and betas loyal to the high alpha, their cloaks billowing like storm banners under torchlight that cut the darkness like fangs. Lord Thorn rode at their fore, his grizzled form astride a massive steed, the antler gavel now sheathed at his belt like a scepter of judgment. The council's reckoning had followed the hunters, drawn by whispers of the exile's flight and Eric's defiance. The packs converging on this ruined sanctum where destiny demanded its due. Snow churned under paws and boots, the wind carrying their scents, a dominant wave of musk, authority, and the underlying rot of fractured trust. Thorn dismounted with a grace born of unyielding power, his eyes sweeping the fray. Kale's poised strike, Eric's protective stance, and Seren, bathed in the pendant's ethereal glow, her emerald gaze steady amid the chaos. The high alpha's face, weathered by moons of intrigue, twisted in recognition. The goddess's mark undeniable now, pulsing like a heartbeat in the frozen night. "The Pathfinder stirs the wilds," he intoned, his voice booming over the settling howls, silencing the betas as torches flared brighter, casting elongated shadows that danced like specters of old betrayals. Blood from Eric's reopened wounds dripped onto the snow, staining it a deep red that mirrored the temple's ancient altars, where the moon's light pooled like liquid silver, urging truths into the open. Serene's chest tightened, the weight of the past crashing upon her like an avalanche. The council's hall, the chain's bite. The rejection that had hollowed her long before exile's bite. Her pack's faces flickered in memory. The alpha who had spurned her bond, deeming her vision's weakness. The elders who had whispered of her oddities under the full moon, herbs glowing in her hands like forbidden stars. Now they stood among Thorn's ranks, eyes averted or hardened. The Matilha's loyalty, a fragile thread strained by fear of the unknown. Kyle seized the moment, lunging at Eric with a roar, claws raking across his shoulder in a spray of warm blood that arced through the air, landing hot on Seren's cheek. Eric countered, grappling the rival in a frenzy of fur and fang, their bodies slamming against the altar with bone-jarring force, the stone cracking under the impact. "Traitor!" Thorn bellowed, but his gaze fixed on Kale, the enforcer's feigned loyalty crumbling as a beta stepped forward, clutching a bloodied missive, sealed with eastern wax, detailing pacts that would flood the borders with shadow pacts. The revelation spread like wildfire through the ranks, growls turning to accusations, the air humming with the scent of pine smoke and dawning betrayal. Seren's vision surged, unbidden and visceral. Futures branching in silver filigree, war's maw swallowing the citadel in flames and blood, Thorn's throne toppled by the very claws he had armed, or Mercy's path, where forgiveness bound the packs, her light guiding them from the abyss, yet demanding she surrender her freedom to their hierarchies. Eric broke free, blood streaming from his shoulder, collapsing to one knee beside her as Kale was seized by Thorn's guards, his snarls muffled into submission. The high alpha approached, his presence a tidal force, but his eyes held not conquest, but the flicker of doubt, the ethical wound of a leader who had condemned the moon's chosen in blindness. "Speak, Pathfinder," Thorn demanded, his voice laced with the gravel of reluctant awe. "The goddess bowed to you. Now the packs bow to truth. What threads bind us from ruin?" Serene rose, the pendant's heat a forge in her veins, her hand finding Eric's scarred one instinctively, their fingers entwining in a grip that resisted yet anchored. The bond a quiet fire amid the storm, rationalized as survival's necessity, yet blooming with the ache of something deeper, redemptive. The choice clawed at her soul, textured with the cold wind's bite and the warmth of Eric's bloodied touch. Forgive the pack's past, embrace the role of guide and bind her fate to theirs, sacrificing the wild freedom of exile for a love that demanded vulnerability, or unleash the full vision's fury, exposing every fracture and igniting war, claiming liberty at the cost of bloodied snow and shattered souls. Eric's gray eyes met hers, haunted by his own guilt, the counsel he had failed to heed, the melancholy of duties that had isolated him, whispering through the bond. "Mercy crowns the fallen, Seren, but only if we choose it over the claw's ease." The moon hung low, its light weaving through the torch's flames, bathing the assembly in silver judgment, as howls rose in uneasy harmony, the night pressing its spiritual weight, redemption through forgiveness, or rebirth in the fires of war. In that suspended breath, With blood pooling warm at her feet and the pendant's pulse echoing the pack's fractured hearts, Seren felt the dilemma's core. What was love, if not the trial of choosing compassion when freedom sang of solitude and destiny demanded a crown forged in sacrifice? The temple stones seemed to hold their breath, the wind falling silent as if the moon itself awaited her word, the silver threads trembling on the edge of weave or unravel. Seren's voice rose like a winter dawn breaking through storm clouds, steady and unyielding, carrying the weight of silver threads that bound the fractured night. The moon does not demand war's fire to mend what claws have torn, she said, her emerald eyes sweeping the assembled packs. The pendant at her throat flaring with a light that pierced the torch flames and cast the temple in ethereal silver. Thorn's grizzled face hardened, then softened in the glow, the High Alpha's unyielding gaze fracturing like ice under lunar thaw. The betas shifted, their growls fading into murmurs, the scent of blood and pine smoke mingling with the jasmine whisper of the goddess's lingering grace. Eric's hand tightened in hers, his scarred fingers a warm anchor against the cold stone, his storm-gray eyes reflecting the quiet resolve blooming in her soul, the melancholy of his guilt yielding to the possibility of redemption, not as reward, but as the hard-won forge of choice. Kale's snarls choked into silence as Thorn's guards dragged him forward, the rival Alpha's pristine mantle now torn and bloodied, his ambition laid bare like a wolf's underbelly exposed to the stars. The missive fluttered from his grasp, its eastern seal cracking open in the snow, revealing maps of invasion routes that snaked through the borderlands like veins of poison. Gasps rippled through the ranks, her pack's faces, once averted in shame, now lifting in dawning horror, the rejection's sting thawing under the truth's relentless light. Seren felt it all, the ache of their past dismissals, the Alpha who had spurned her bond under a harvest moon, deeming her visions the ravings of weakness, the elders who had whispered of her glowing herbs as omens of curse. Yet in this moment, empathy surged, textured with the wind's chill bite and the warmth of Eric's bloodied touch, urging her toward mercy's precipice. What was strength, if not choosing compassion, when the claw's ease sang of vengeance? Freedom tempted, a solitary path into the wilds where her light could wander unbound, but destiny's weave pulled tighter, demanding union, not of crowns, but of souls scarred by the same frost. Thorn stepped closer, his antler gavel now a staff of reluctant humility, the pack's howls falling silent as the moon climbed higher, bathing the ruins in a silver tide that turned bloodstains to shimmering rubies. The council's blindness has invited the shadows, he admitted, his voice gravel rough with the ethical wound of leadership's failures, eyes meeting Seren's without the throne's armor. We condemned what the goddess exalted. Speak your judgment, Pathfinder, war to purge the traitors, or forgiveness to bind what phrase? The air hummed with the question's weight, the temple's arches seeming to lean in, ancient runes pulsing in harmony with her pendant, the silver veins tracing futures where packs united under lunar light, their borders healed not by blade, but by the quiet power of revealed truths. Seren's heart thundered, a visceral drum against the night's spiritual hush, visions cascading like falling snow. Eric at her side in council halls, his melancholy transmuted to purpose, their bond no longer resisted but accepted as the thread that wove redemption through the pack's guilt-ridden tapestry. Sacrifice loomed, her freedom for their healing, the wild solitude traded for the Matilha's embrace, love emerging not as instant flame but as the slow burn of trials shared. She released Eric's hand, stepping forward alone, the pendant's glow enveloping her like a cloak of starlight, its warmth seeping into the frozen earth and stirring faint green shoots from the snow-cracked altar, symbols of Renascimento, life defiant against winter's grasp. Forgiveness, she declared, her words a melody woven from wind and whisper, carrying the scent of night-blooming jasmine and fresh earth. Not for thrones or power, but for the souls that falter in the dark, The threads show a path of union. Heal the fractures, guide the packs from the abyss, and let mercy crown us all. But know this, the moon's chosen demands no chains. I offer my light freely, or not at all. The assembly exhaled as one, a collective breath that stirred the flames to brighter life, torches crackling like the rebirth of hope. Thorn knelt then, the High Alpha's broad shoulders bowing under the weight of atonement, his packs following in a wave of lowered heads and subdued howls, raw, primal, yet laced with the spiritual awe of revelation. Kyle was bound in silver chains, not for execution, but for trial under the moon's impartial gaze, his treason a catalyst for the pack's ethical reckoning. Eric rose beside her, his presence no longer a resisted pull, but an accepted anchor, his hand finding hers again with a tenderness born of shared wounds. The old burn scar on his collarbone caught the light, mirroring the pendant's veins, a mark of guilt transfigured into strength. "You've chosen us," he murmured, voice low and resonant, eyes haunted no more by isolation, but alight with the quiet fire of redemption. "And in choosing, you've healed what duty broke in me." Their scents entwined fully now, herbs and lunar frost with oak and embers, a bond rationalized no longer, but embraced as destiny's quiet proof, love as the trial that forged them anew. As dawn's first pallor gilded the eastern peaks, the packs gathered around the altar, voices rising in a chant to the goddess, the wind carrying their harmony across the frozen wilds like a prophecy fulfilled. Seren felt the renascimento settle in her bones. Rejection's ice melted into the warmth of belonging, her pathfinder's gift, no curse but a beacon, guiding not through conquest, but compassion. Eric's arm encircled her waist, a subtle union amid the gathering, their shared gaze on the moon fading into morning light, a symbol of cycles unbroken, blood and fire yielding to silver's enduring weave. The temple, once ruins of forgotten rites, stood as witness to the choice, sacrifice for healing, solitude for solidarity, and in the heart of it all, a love that transcended hierarchies, proving redemption's flame eternal. Yet even in triumph, the dilemma lingered, a spiritual echo in the silence. What was destiny, if not the freedom to choose mercy over might, and in that choice, find the true crown of the soul? The snow began to fall softly now, each flake a benediction, blanketing the bloodied ground in white promise, as the packs turned toward the citadel, their steps unified under the moon's watchful eye. If your heart beat alongside ours, like, comment, and subscribe. Because every soul that joins our moon keeps the flame of redemption alive.